I think that anxiety and fear, I'm using them somewhat interchangeably here. I think maybe the single most common emotion we share with everyone. But I think, though it may seem counterintuitive to risk exposing our anxiety and whatever it is that we're anxious about, I think that it actually may be the single greatest source of our own liberation. And it may also be the greatest asset for experiencing intimacy in life. And by intimacy, I mean finding a place in the heart of other people and they in ours.
Welcome to Great Practice, Great Life by Atticus Incorporated. What if you could hang out with successful small and solo law firm attorneys, ask them about their successes and failures, their business strategies and mindset habits, then take an insight or two to guide your own growth in your practice? Each week, Steve Riley shares an in-depth look at how to work less while maintaining high client service standards, reduce your stress levels while growing your income, and find time to make changes when you are time-starved. Steve is a lawyer coach for more than 20 years and a former trial attorney. His goal is to provide strategies to help you balance your lives and grow your practice. Now, here's Steve.
Hi, it's Steve Riley. Welcome to today's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. And today we are blessed to be here with our good friend and a big supporter of the Atticus community, Brother Curtis. So, Brother Curtis, welcome to the episode. Welcome once again.
Thank you, Steve. My pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here because you bring such unique perspective to life, to our world. And one of the things that you said right before I hit the record button is you were talking about what it's like to be a monk from the perspective that you're not a competitor. Your monks do not perceive themselves as competitors. They do not perceive themselves as, well, I'm going to let you answer the question. So will that be a sufficient question for you to kind of go off on with that?
Well, I'll give it a try, Steve, and you decide. Well, one of the qualities, one of the charisms down through the centuries of monasticism is that monasteries are sanctuaries. That is, they're safe places, and that's for more than one reason. But I think it's largely informed by the monks themselves. And I think one of the qualities of monasticism is that we're not competitors. So we earn no salary. There's no such thing as a bigger number of clientele for whom we're searching. We're simply available to companion people along the way. And it's a great gift to be able to welcome people into a place that is safe, that they will find safe. We very much hope that. And so I say, in the context in which you've given me this invitation, Steve, to be with the Atticus community, I hope that I can embody a kind of welcome and kind of safety for who and where and what people are is credible and welcomed, and it matters, and it's full of possibility.
That is perfect. That is the predominant reason that Mark and myself have invited you to share your wisdom, share your thinking, because you come from a completely different perspective. And you bring that monastic perspective into our conversations because we are competitors. We're trained to compete. We're trained to advocate. We're trained to battle. And, interestingly, you're not worried about what your Christmas bonus looks like.
Quite.
Right? You're not particularly concerned how many clients you carry and how big your law firm is, right? You're not in that perspective. It's something that I really appreciate because you can bring such a unique perspective to life, to emotions, to human suffering or, gratitude, some of the conversations that we've had. So I like that it's very hard for most of our clients to, come to visit you at your monastery. So at least we get a little Brother Curtis love via the, Great Practice, Great Life show, and a little bit of your thinking and your perspective. And everybody loves to hear what you have to think and say about stuff. So I've got questions for you if you're up for them, if you're ready.
Please, Steve.
So one of the things that I'd like to talk to you about today is a really heavy, intense emotion. And one of the premises that we work with in our community that sometimes lawyers, their team members, they don't grow not because of lack of intellectual capabilities, but the ceilings that hit them, that they hit up against, are emotional ceilings. And probably one of the biggest things that people deal with are fear and anxiety, like as a common experience, fear and anxiety, especially in a high stake profession like the law. But I don't think we're unique to that. I think, fear and anxiety is everywhere. And these particular emotions are so prevalent. And I want to talk to you just for a little bit today about fear and anxiety, like exploring what it is, getting your perspective, getting your counsel on it, getting your wisdom on it, helping distinguish between fear and anxiety, helping people understand how it influences them to the extent that you feel comfortable talking about that. Is that something you're up for today that you'd be willing to do with me?
Gladly, Steve. Gladly, Steve.
So let's hit it pretty hard. Can you distinguish for me, from your perspective, the difference between fear and anxiety?
I think they're cousins, so they're related. But I think I would say anxiety is much more diffuse, and it's imprecise, kind of a vague sense of apprehension. It's sometimes called free-floating anxiety because it's just kind of out there. And if someone's feeling anxious, if you were to ask them, "So what are you anxious about?" They may actually even have to pause for a moment and say, "Well, it's actually such and such and such and such." Whereas fear is much more an emotional response to something that is real and known and immediate and nameable. I think that fear can cause anxiety, anxiety can cause fear. I think when you're in a moment feeling overwhelmed and unsafe, apprehensive, I think the difference between the two is immaterial.
Neither one of them feels very good.
Yeah, it doesn't
Right.
feel good.
Yeah,
It's not good, and yet I think it's incredibly common.
I think so. And that's one of the reasons I want to talk to you about it. I, I think you nailed it. For me, anxiety is looking at the ocean and saying there's nothing safe in that ocean. It's not safe. Fear for me is seeing a shark swimming towards me. So I think the free floating feeling of anxiety is a more dangerous ongoing feeling for a lot of people because they just feel anxious and they have no clarity as to why. From your perspective, advising, counseling, giving spiritual guidance to people, what are your thoughts on that? Would you agree with that? Would you interpret it differently?
I agree with what you've said, Steve. Um, and I think that anxiety is taps a huge amount of creative energy. If you get on the treadmill of anxiety, you can go from, well, what if, and then what if, and then what if it can just grow like a snowball uh, going down a hill. Um, and I think that anxiety is highly overrated. I think it doesn't produce good stuff for the most part. Uh, it inhales a huge amount of energy. It's like here I live in New England. It'd be like trying to heat the home with the windows open. It just inhales a huge amount of energy, and it doesn't produce. It doesn't produce anything helpful. So I'm always inclined to bring what is deep in the soul out into the light. I mean, I am typically wanting to ask questions, and I will ask someone who I'm meeting, may I ask you? May I ask you? I ask a lot of times, may I ask you about such and such? And so if someone spoke about being anxious, I would ask them, what does that mean? When you say anxious, can you define that? And I'm not thinking about the Webster definition, which is fine, but I'm thinking about their definition. And I would also want to ask them, where did you learn that word? Where did you learn that emotion? Who taught you that, or what taught you that? Because we don't make it up, not from scratch. I think for many people, there's a family of origin, source of something that was uncertain or unsafe in what they call home, or people who had a primary formative influence on their life. Formative, or if it's in a bad way, deformative influence on their life. Long before they could make sense out of it, they were already reacting to it, not responding, but reacting to it. And it was a matter of life and death. I mean, a young child who has learned something about anxiety is not going to calculate how to cope with this. They're simply going to react to situations that are unsafe or are similar to situations which they experience as unsafe. Situations, people, types of settings. When I hear people speak about anxiety, I feel enormous compassion, just enormous compassion. Not that I've necessarily suffered in ways that they have suffered. I may have. But I know something of the feeling that could be so deliberating and so tedious.
Say more about it being tedious, because you've clearly done some thinking about this. You've clearly done some exploration about it. Why would you call anxiety tedious?
I think for many people, it's not going to go away unless it's addressed head on, unless it's brought into the light. And I think that especially people who are able, or let's say people in the Atticus community who have a fine education, a keen mind, a successful practice, lots of high octane attributes. There may be an element of shame around anxiety because there's part of them that says, I should not be feeling anxious. Look at this, look at my caseload, look at my income, look at my home, look at people who love me. And yet they may be quite debilitated by anxiety. And it's a matter of shame. I say shame because the unspoken emotion is, I should not be feeling this. This does not make sense, because anxiety is deeper than sense making.
It's an interesting argument. I would say that everyone suffers from some form of unstated, uncommunicated anxiety that they're either ashamed of, embarrassed about, and not sure how to cope with, which is the reason I've invited you into our virtual, we're kind of going to your virtual monastery now, but to have you talk to us about that just from the perspective of helping people distinguish it. For me, I think fog is the first thing I think of when I think of anxiety, because I can't see it. I can feel it. I can't see my way through it, but it causes me sight impairment. I can't see through it. And so for me, usually recognizing when I'm in a state of anxiety, which if you're used to it, if you wake up, one of the practices that you have is you have some tremendous gratitude practices. I really think that there's a lot of people that have the exact opposite, Brother Curtis. I think they have anxiety practices. I, I think there's some members of my family that might have anxiety practices where they wake up and they feel good. And the first thing they try and do is say, well, this feels really uncomfortable. I'm not used to this. I need to get myself geared up. I need to get myself stressed up because this is feeling good will make me lose my edge. This feeling good is not something I deserve. This feeling good is not something I'm used to. Does that communicate to you? Does that make any sense to you from your perspective?
It does, very much so. And the metaphor you use about fog, this element of fog about anxiety, is a really powerful metaphor. I'll take that metaphor and say, so you live on the coast, where lots of boats to take out to sea. A boat going out in the ocean is going to anticipate that there may well be a turn in the weather, and they could easily sail into fog. And so you have to take some compensatory practices to heart to help you deal with fog. And I would say that the single most helpful practice, which I think is essential to cope with the fogging of anxiety, which is very deep inside of us, is the help of another person whose perspective is not living inside of our fog, but who's outside of it. And if this is a person whom we feel a measure of trust, a person whom we're convinced has our best in mind, and a person who will hold what feels to be quite secret or maybe even shaming, if they will hold that in their complete confidence, then I think we have an enormous vehicle to be dealing with anxiety. So if we invite someone into our life, I think as I've said now, and as you've experienced before, I will ask whether I may ask questions. And even if someone cannot start out naming the anxiety, it's just this term free-floating anxiety. It's just, I don't know, I just don't feel good. I just feel like something's not together, threatening, something out there. With their permission, I would ask questions and then say more. What's the trigger? Who taught you this? What's your experience down through the years? Has what you were taught, intentionally or not, proven to be true? How have you survived? How have you come into the clearing that you're in? So I would, with their permission, keep asking questions. And I think that it will bring light upon the fog. And I think for many of us, not for all, but for many of us, there's kind of a Wizard of Oz component to this. I mean, once it's brought into the light, once it's been outed, it's not something to be feared. It's a very relieving experience.
It's interesting because I believe that some lawyers train themselves to be anxious on a regular basis because it allows them to be on guard. It allows them to look for what may be coming at them next, what they need to be scanning the horizon for. And it puts them into a constant, chronic state of adrenaline hype. They're using their adrenaline constantly. It's a very, very expensive fuel. And they're using it constantly to distinguish, or not, I shouldn't say distinguish, Brother Curtis, to really pump themselves up so they have kind of an edge. They're looking for that edge. Have you noticed that in other people, like that there's other professionals that might come to you for advice and counsel, and they use anxiety as a fuel to really give them a professional edge?
Yes, I hear that. And I would say I would not completely pitch anxiety. I think that a little bit of anxiety, kind of like a little bit of Tabasco sauce, can actually bring out the best. Can bring out the best, a little bit. And I think it can make us more human, more real, because it can be humbling. And I say that in a good way. But that's only the Tabasco sauce amount of anxiety. I would, with someone's permission, I would rather explore with them what is the essential outcome and what are the skills, emotions, repertoire on which you need to tap to be successful in this encounter. And is there a synonym to anxiety that is not laden with so much negative freight? Because anxiety has got so much freight to it. So let's explore, what is it? I mean, when you talk about anxiety, so talk about that more. What is it that helps you play the strongest hand when you're in the courtroom? Right? So talk about that. And how about if we see if we can find a synonym that can work for you, that can bring out the best, but mitigate the worst? Because I think anxiety, long term, living pumped up on anxiety, is not good for the heart. It's not good for the head. It's certainly not good for the stomach. It's not good for the long haul. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. I mean, your body will get even.
Nothing is going to impact your law practice like AI. The impact of AI on the legal industry will be transformative. The question is, are you prepared? Now, I've done a podcast on this previously, the 3 challenges of integrating AI into your law practice. One of the things I want to remind you is that we're teaching in 2025 a Grow Your Practice with AI course. Now, this will be taught 4 times live, but it includes 22 hours of previously recorded episodes in 2024. So episodes that we taught everything from how to use AI to look at deposition, go through complex documents, how to train your team using AI as a shortcut for team training. All those different courses are recorded and ready for your viewing. Now, if you're an Atticus member, it's already included in your membership. All you have to do is sign up for the class. We'll teach it 4 times live in 2025. Now, if you're new to Atticus and you're not an existing member, the investment is $1,500 for this program. $1,500 covers it all of 2025. Furthermore, if you are an audience member and you want to take advantage of a special code just for audience members, the code is AI Podcast 300. So when you register, it takes $300 off your investment. So the $1,500 drops to $1,200. So if you haven't taken advantage of this, it's a no-brainer deal. So if you're new to Atticus and you want to check us out, this is a great way of checking us out. It's a virtual program, so you don't have to travel anywhere. I promise you, you'll make 10 times that investment back. So with that, the information on how to register is in the link below. Look forward to seeing you there.
Your body will get even.
It's great. Your body will get even. I think I think you're squeezing the body for adrenaline and using anxiety as the emotion to pump it.
Yeah.
You're dredging, you're dredging for very expensive fuel. And I think that fuel ultimately gets you to a point where it causes tremendous long-term pain. So you've really given us 2 strategies so far. Number 1, as the keeper of questions, you've given us some powerful questions that should come from a trusted advisor, trusted listener. And number 2, giving us the capability of reframing what are you trying to accomplish through anxiety that may not require you to use anxiety as a fuel. Are there any other strategies that you would approach or advise someone on as they start to cope with or think about anxiety?
I think that anxiety and fear, I'm using them somewhat interchangeably here. I think maybe the single most common emotion we share with everyone. But I think, though it may seem counterintuitive to risk exposing our anxiety and whatever it is that we're anxious about, I think that it actually may be the single greatest source of our own liberation. And it may also be the greatest asset for experiencing intimacy in life. And by intimacy, I mean finding a place in the heart of other people and they in ours. I think it's not our successes that we have most in common with other people. I mean, getting the gold star and the A's in our report cards. It's not our successes that we have most in common. It's our weaknesses, I think, that we have most in common. And I think that anxiety and its cousin fear, I think, are what we most have in common with most people. And to find a person, to find a setting where we may be exposing of what comes out of the shadowed, or as you say, fogged chamber of our heart is absolutely liberating and gives us, I think, the greatest sense of belonging.
That's interesting. Say more about that, because you're basically making the argument that the bridge, the intimacy connection with another human being, the easiest one to cross would be fear or anxiety. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying in general, I think it's our weaknesses that we most share with people and not our strengths. And I think that fear and anxiety may be the most prominent weakness that we share with everyone. And it crosses class, race, age, religious difference, orientations, income. It crosses all the spectrums.
It's a fascinating argument, or it's actually a very insightful position. As I sit here and ruminate on it, I think you're right on the money, which is probably not the best metaphor to use with a monk.
Well, I hear what you're saying. So I'm a monk, and we look to the scriptures for inspiration. The Psalms are a part of the religious compendium, part of the sacred texts that are shared by Christians and Jews and Muslims. And they're not in categories. Like there's a set of Psalms for rich people. There's a set of Psalms for educated people. There's a set of Psalms for young people. It's just a whole compendium, 150 different Psalms that clearly speak to everyone because they've been saved for thousands and thousands of years. Which I think is revealing that these same scriptures are speaking to everyone, whoever they are, whatever they are, however it is that they've gotten to be the way they are. It's the same story. And I think we are so much alike, all of us. And it's not just the DNA. So going back to fear, if you look at the Psalm text, the commendation that is most often repeated in the Psalms is to not be afraid. It's to not be afraid, which is revealing. If we do the detective work, we say, so why, if that's the answer, what's the question? Well, the presenting issue is that people are desperately afraid. It's very interesting that when the Psalms talk about not being afraid, there's a reason why. And I'm thinking of one psalm which so many people, Christian, Jewish, Muslim traditions, have taken to heart as Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And there's a phrase, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I mean, we're talking about fear here. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear evil because, and what is the because? I will not fear because, and the answer is because you are with me. The answer isn't because you're going to take it all away. It's going to be peachy. Not forget about being afraid. It's not that it's going to be all taken away. It's that we are not going to be alone. And I think that is the power of opening our hearts, whether it's in a 12-step meeting or over a cup of coffee with a dear friend, a dear and trusted friend, to be really clear what is going on in the inner caves of our own heart. So powerful, so liberating, and it builds such a sense of belonging and intimacy. Because I think that this is what we most have in common with other people. It's not what keeps us from people. It's what invites us into other people's lives, and they into ours.
You never fail to find a way of giving me a completely different perspective to something. And I have heard that psalm my entire life, and I never made that connection until you just clarified that for me. You're not going to take it away, but you're with me. So, and then whether that's with a friend or a spiritual guide, that's where you find the power.
I think so.
So let me ask you another question, because I don't want to touch that anymore, because that's pretty profound and it's beautiful. So thank you for that. That was just beautiful. What other hope or encouragement could you give to our listeners as they wrestle with anxiety and fear? Are there practices or other thoughts? There are other ways that you would encourage them, because you've talked about questions. You've talked about a couple of different things. What other thoughts do you have that you would pass on to encourage people?
I would ask if someone would welcome this question. What good has come out of your anxiety? What good has come out of your fear? Has any? Because I suspect that for some of us, our experience of anxiety, which can be debilitating, has experienced a kind of healing, that we are no longer where we were. Of course, me being the keeper of questions, I would want to ask why. Why are you no longer there? And to help people trace back through the breadcrumbs, what has brought you to this point, given where you were? Because I think it's probably nothing less than a miracle, but it's real. It's very real. So I would encourage someone to get on current speaking terms with where they were with their fear and where they are with their fear. And has there been any good that has come out of an experience of fear from their past? I have a friend who's an oncologist, and she's a highly respected academic. She also has a private practice. She's much, much, much sought after as an oncologist, people looking for help and hope with their cancer. And if I were to say, if I were to wonder aloud to her, are you so effective as a physician, as an oncologist, because you know about cancer from the inside out? She would tell me, she has told me, no, I've never had cancer. She's an oncologist, a brilliant, she's never had cancer. So I would say, why do your patients think you are so absolutely amazing? You're a brilliant scientist. I mean, the stats are out there for that. The cure rate is amazing. But it's her bedside manner that has really wowed her patients. And she's not making it up. And so I asked her one time, so why are you such an effective oncologist as a person at the bedside of a patient who's hoping to live and who's maybe dying? And she told me, I've never had cancer, but I have had fear. And I said, I asked her with her permission, are you still afraid? And she said, not like I was. And I said, why? And so she told me her story, which is so beautiful, which her patients actually don't know. It wouldn't be appropriate. It would be crossing a professional boundary, not unlike what lawyers, therapists, financial professionals who are part of Atticus are not going to cross a professional boundary and say much about their own story. But it was so real because her patients actually don't need to know her stats, actually don't need to know her story. They simply know in some very deep way, as deeply settled as their fear is, that she is believable and trustable. She's the real deal. She's authentic. She's a liberator. And I think that that's where, if we trust our heart, we will know whom we can trust. We will know to whom we can open our hearts. It may involve some quote unquote contracting, low level contracting. Nothing we're going to sign our name to, not even a shake of the hand. But it could be contracting in the way of saying, I would really value being able to open my heart to you. Would you receive what I have to say? Of course, I'm speaking to you. I want to speak to you in complete confidence. But I want to take the risk of opening myself up to you because I have a sense that you could understand and that you may be able actually to help me. Or if you can't help me with something you would say in response, I would know at the very least, which may be the very best, that you are with me. It's a paraphrase of Psalm 23, that you are with me. Would you be willing?
So is that her story?
That was her response.
Got you. Fascinating response.
But I think that we will know whom we can trust. I suspect this happens all the time within the Atticus family, with lawyers, with the psychotherapists who work under your wing, with financial professionals who are learning the intricacies of people's wherewithal and how much it's at risk. I think that we've got. I think most people have a well-honed gut and will know whom they can trust, or will at least know how to go about testing whether they can trust someone. I think that if we're going to give someone access to our inner life, we have to trust them. We have to be able to trust them. And I would say even more than that, we have to have a sense that the trust that we feel, however small it may be, is something that we can imagine growing.
Do you think the development and the extending of that trust enhances or builds resilience as a defense to ongoing fear and anxiety? The ability to learn and extend trust are the flip side of that, to extend vulnerability with the hope of trust from another human being, is the core for building resilience in the face of fear and anxiety?
Hmm. May I ask, what do you think?
You always do that to me. I don't
What do
know.
you think?
I'm listening to what you're saying, and I see that in the face of fear or anxiety, you need courage, the ability to act in the face of it. But to take a risk where someone else is helping you take the risk, whether it's a friend, over a cup of coffee, or a professional, that the extending of trust opens up vulnerability. And then the acceptance of it builds a resilience, like a framework, like a bridge. So as you and I have developed our relationship, predominantly virtually, each time I talk to you, I feel a greater level of trust. And as that trust grows, I have a greater level of resilience or faith in our relationship. And so as I'm listening to you, I'm questioning that maybe the interesting antidote for fear and anxiety, in not all, but some situations, may be greater exposure to vulnerability, greater investment into trust, to actually develop some emotional resiliency in the face of anxiety and fear. Does that make any sense to you?
I'll respond to you. It makes sense to you, I think, which is beautiful to hear you say and claim. And yes, I love your word, resilience. It sounds like it's an antidote to anxiety, um, because resilience, just like anxiety, can be free floating. I think resilience can be free flowing. I think it will just flow into other areas of life. I think not just specifically related to whatever it is that we may have been talking about, to a soulmate, but I think it will flow into other aspects of our life. I think, I mean, this is picking up in your word resilience. I love the word. I think that it may be I don't know if it's a single most fear. It's a huge fear for people, that they will be exposed, that they will be outed, that who they are, what they are, actually the inner workings of their life, their history, whatever, will become known. Huge fear for a lot of people, huge fear. If you only knew. And it doesn't matter if you have a success, this person would be saying under their breath, if you only knew, if you only knew. Give them a gold star if you only knew. If they fail, they would say, well, I deserve this. It's a huge issue. It can be a shaming issue of what if people really knew. I think if we flip that coin, I would say an innate need, it's one of our greatest needs in life, is to be known. The greatest fear can be that we would be known. And the greatest need, the greatest craving would be that we be known. And I think that inside of those two circles is the way to life. And I don't think we can claim that alone. I think we need help with that. I think that that's where we need someone with whom we can open our heart, who will hear the truth about ourselves, whom we may give permission to keep asking questions, like say more, say more. Can you say more? Can you go deeper than that? And to bring what is in the deep recesses of our life into the light. And to stay there with us, not to pass out, not to say, forget it, you're hopeless, you're not to confirm our worst thoughts, but to affirm our place in life. And to treat us with a kind of dignity that we simply cannot manifest for ourselves in and of ourselves.
So in a moment, I'm going to ask you if you're up for it to do a guided meditation for us. But as we start to close out this particular conversation, the one thing I'm taking away, and I'm afraid to even ask you your opinion of it because you'll turn it back to me, was it sounds like the antidote or part of the antidote to anxiety and fear is actually found in relationship with other people. The ability to trust, communicate, make yourself vulnerable, communicate in a way that they know us. So we're known to them and they are known to us. And from there, the trust builds resilience and kind of works like a lighthouse, working with my fog analogy. My friends are a lighthouse when I have anxiety and fear. My friend Mark, provides like a lighthouse when I have anxiety and fear. So it sounds like to me, Brother Curtis, that the greatest investment that you could make, or the greatest way of clearing the fog of anxiety, is to have relationships with people that know you, appreciate you, that the relationship goes both ways, obviously. And inside the relationship, trust and resilience are found as a way of protecting one another from anxiety and fear, because you can't really do it by yourself, as you're saying. You're going to find the protection from anxiety and fear actually in relationship with someone else can allow you to kind of work through the fog, see through the fog, which is, for me, the biggest takeaway. I'm not going to find a release from anxiety and fear by myself, but I may find a refuge from anxiety and fear through relationship with somebody else. Any feedback on that?
Beautifully spoken, Steve. Beautifully spoken. I think that you qualified yourself there at the end about the gift of companionship. I don't know that what you said earlier does not ring completely true to me, that in relationship to other will be protected from fear and anxiety. I don't know. I mean, maybe so, but that's not always my experience. What my experience is that we'll be companion, that will not be left alone in our fear and anxiety. And that in itself may be the way out of the tomb of fear. I think we need to belong. I think we have an innate need to belong. And there's no way to more powerfully experience that than to be companioned by someone who knows us deeply, who's there for us.
Brother Curtis, thank you. You've never failed to give me a completely different insight and perspective to life, in particular my own life. I learned a lot today, so I want to thank you for that.
Welcome, Steve. My honor.
I'd like to put in a word to your boss so we can get you a good Christmas bonus.
Well, that's generous of you. It won't work. But anyway.
um, so are you up for putting us through a guided meditation on this topic? Are you up for it?
Sure, sure, sure. So I welcome you to be still and to have your hands comfortably in your lap. You may want to keep your eyes open. Um, Look on to something that is meaningful or beautiful, or perhaps you want to close your eyes. I invite you to think where fear has had its place in your life as you look backwards. And I assume that the fear, which at some point may have almost crippled you, may have felt like a kiss of death, has not proven to be so because you're alive. You're alive today. What happened? What happened with the fear that was so crippling? What now, in the face of fear, which you knew, do you know to be true about life, about love, about hope? What are the takeaways that you can glean from fear that is no longer yours? And if you were to make a resolve of this is how I want to be with people, so many of whom live with fear, in light of what you have known and from where you've come, what is it that you want to be in the presence of other people whom you sense are living with fear? What is it that you want to be? And I'll say this sight unseen with virtually all of you, that I presume you're a walking miracle. How is it that you've come to be where you are, what you are, the way you are? You're a walking miracle. And so is everyone else. And you have the power to help them claim that. You do. You do.
All right, Brother Curtis. Any closing thoughts for you today?
As you know, I'm living in a monastery. I have for so many years. I wake up every day surprised that I'm still alive. And I assume the fact that I've been given as much as one more day. I mean, who knows if I'll make it through the day, but been given as much as one more day to be alive, that I be a missionary, to bear with great generosity, to bear like a mirror the beams of light and life and love to others. It may be with my words, but much more so with my being. I think that we're all missionaries. And I think that so many people are afraid, live with fear of their lives, of what they're, from where they've come, what they hold secret, what is for them shaming. I think that also many people live with fear because of their power, uh, which also needs to be unleashed. So I lobby for you to say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. It's highly overrated, but I think it's usable, and from it, there's a great deal that can be learned, including I use our friend Steve's word resilience. I think there's so much resilience that can be claimed that can be as pervasive as anxiety can be free floating. Do it. Do it. You're worth it. Do it.
That's perfect, Brother Curtis. As always, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for being a beam of light and being kind and contributing what you have today. So thank you
My
very much.
honor. My honor, Steve. My honor. Thanks to you. Thanks, Grace, for your work behind the scenes.
Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode could help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.